Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Elena Pinto this week, the state of Texas sends a bill banning all THC-infused hemp products to the governor's desk and sets off an industry firestorm caused by their prohibitionist Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's gloating news conference.
Right now, the Lieutenant Governor is holding a press conference and just spitting out lies like he always does.
Plus, thanks to the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast, we've got an exclusive interview with Nevada Congresspersons Dina Titus on the status of the state's 2.0 Act that would regulate and legalize cannabis in America.
We're starting to realize that you got to eat this one bite at a time, and this would be a good way to do it. You're right. Republicans like to talk about states' rights, and that's what this does. And we recognize that states are so far ahead of the federal government that if we're not going to catch up, we at least need to get out of the way.
And more state battles with citizen-initiated ballot questions as democracy continues to erode across the nation. And now Nebraska looks to change the voters' will on medical cannabis. And a damning medical research study out of the University of California, San Francisco that ties chronic use of cannabis to vascular heart deterioration. Plus, this is the week of the annual Flower Expo trade show in Massachusetts, now with a new location in Northampton, one of the friendliest cities to cannabis in the Bay State. All that and state-by-state cannabis reports on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Elena Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Elena Pinto. So have you downloaded the new PCM TV app yet? It's the freest and easiest way to gain access to our weekly news show, and you will find documentation of the last 4 years of this historic fight, plus the best of the past productions of other shows produced by Pro Cannabis Media over the years. First up this week, the state of Texas. A bill to ban THC-infused hemp passed both chambers of that state's Congress and is headed to the Governor Greg Abbott's desk to be signed into law, vetoed, or he can ignore it and it still becomes law. But needless to say, the over 8,000 businesses in Texas that legally sell hemp products are freaking out. That industry is responsible for generating over $6 billion in revenue, and thousands of people are employed in that side of the industry in that state. Those who took advantage of the loophole in the Farm Bill of 2018 to create this vibrant hemp industry are facing the end of their businesses and livelihoods. That Farm Bill defined hemp as having less than 0.3% of THC in dry weight. THC is an intoxicating cannabinoid in the plant that gets you high. So, what do you think happened? Well, many people and businesses figured out how to grow hemp and get it tested and approved as hemp, and then create a product called THCA that gets you high as soon as you heat it up or light it. But now many states are banning these products, which have been sold to underage young people and are available at gas stations, convenience stores, and smoke shops. And some states like Ohio are moving all of these products into licensed cannabis dispensaries, but others, like California, are banning them altogether. This week, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick held a news conference and showcased these products in front of the media. Patrick used, though, already debunked research studies on the impact of these products and lied about their makeup and impact. Needless to say, this was not well received by the existing hemp industry, including Lucas Gilkey of Hometown Hero Hemp in Austin.
Hey everybody, Lucas here with Hometown Hero. Right now, the Lieutenant Governor is holding a press conference and just spitting out lies like he always does. So he just held up one of our products, this exact product, and said it had 6,000 milligrams, which it does not. Lieutenant Governor also said that all the products that he had on that table are a variety of deltas, and he said Delta 10, Delta 6, a whole bunch of stuff. It is very clearly stated what this is: 20 milligrams Delta 9 THC and 20 milligrams CBD per piece. He said the ingredients, we don't know what's in it. All of the ingredients, every single ingredient are right there. All the nutrition panels. There's a COA per state law in Texas because this is a regulated product by the state of Texas per HB 1325, which Senator Perry passed. Again, this is a guy that has absolutely no clue what he is talking about. I'm embarrassed that we vote him into office. And please help us get rid of this guy next time he comes up for election. I'm tired of dealing with this.
With more on this story and the impact of this potential ban on these products, here's our hemp reporter, Carrie Hinkle from the Bayou City Hemp Company.
This is Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and I'm back again with my next hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. So, this week, last week of May, has seen quite a lot of developments in our home state of Texas around SB3, the ban bill that has been making its way through the legislature for a few months now. If you haven't seen, on Wednesday of this week, the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, held a press conference that featured a lot of comical theatrics. He unveiled a bunch of THC snacks underneath a cloth and decided to throw one at a reporter and accused that if you take any of these products that your mind will be altered for the rest of your life. So Lieutenant Governor clearly has made his position well known on this Senate bill, and now that it has passed both the House and Senate, it now sits squarely on Governor Greg Abbott's desk. We as a company and the industry have honestly never been more united against SB3. This ban bill would impact hemp hearts, hemp seeds, and protein products. It would impact low-dose beverages like what we sell and a plethora of other products that veterans, mothers, grandmothers, and all consumers throughout Texas rely upon. So we are now in a strong veto campaign urging Governor Abbott to veto the bill. You will see on Monday that there will be a press conference in the Capitol that will feature a lot of people that are being impacted by this potential ban bill, which will be headlined by some important people in the veteran community. So, and even if Governor Greg Abbott does decide to ban our products, killing the industry and ruining thousands, if not millions, of lives in Texas, there are other legal options to pursue. We have lawsuits, injunctions, etc. So there is going to be a fight in the freedom state of Texas to continue to allow consumers to have these products. So it has been quite tumultuous, but we are living to fight another day. And if you would, you can go to hempsupporter.com/stateaction/Texas, and that is where you will find an email campaign that allows you to contact the governor in a matter of seconds, urging him to veto that bill. So we will live to fight another day, and I'm sure I will be back next week to provide more updates on this very important bill in the biggest hemp state in the country. Again, I'm Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and this was my hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
In reaction to this news conference and potential ban on THC hemp products, the Texas Commissioner on Agriculture, Sid Miller, issued the following statement that is being viewed by the hemp industry as even more confusing. Miller said, "Texas farmers are worried about the effects of Senate Bill 3 on the hemp industry. This legislation does not ban growing hemp or planting hemp for biomass. It's a targeted effort to crack down on abuse of THC in the retail sector, not a ban on legitimate hemp farming." The end of that quote. One more note, though, from the state of Texas this week. The city of Denton was one of the 7 localities in that state that decriminalized cannabis possession through the ballot box in 2022. But this week, the city council, in a 4-3 vote, changed that citizen-led initiative and repealed the decriminalization ordinance. Another example, though, of how states continue to overrule basic tenets of democracy. Fortunately, in Michigan, citizen-led initiatives at least get some respect for their opinions and advocacy for the cause. One of the champions in that state who is always actively involved in state policy is our own correspondent, Amy Carter. This week, she reports from inside the State House in Lansing. Here's Amy.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm reporting from the state capitol in Lansing, Michigan, and there are a few things going on here that you should know about. One is that lawmakers are eagerly pushing through a bill to add roadside saliva testing for DUIs. There are already 2 established laws in the state that create a conflict, especially for medical patients. One is the internal possession law that was established under the Medical Marijuana Act of 2008 and the MRTMA of 2018. Here's the problem. Cannabis stays in our bodies for 30 days after use. For those who need plant medicine, this is almost impossible. Proving impairment with cannabis in your system continues to be a challenge that many states are struggling with. Rather than continuing to study and research more accurate ways to gauge impairment while under the influence, there is no need to fast track this bill until a more accurate measurement procedure is discovered. If you look at the details of this proposed law, It seems to benefit testing labs more than protecting the public. Plus, it puts undue responsibility on police. Michigan Weedsters urges you to reach out to your lawmakers and let your voice be heard. Next up, the decline in cannabis sales. During the first 3 months of the year, sales have decreased by $30 million. Well, that might sound significant. The best part of the decline is that thanks to oversupply, Michiganders might be spending less money, but they are still buying more products than ever. On a higher note, mark your calendars for Hazy Hole's Cannabis Classic on June 9th at the Orchard Hills Country Club in Buchanan, Michigan. You don't have to be a golfer to join in on the fun. It's going to be a blast. Come swing with the cannabis community at Michigan's premier legacy golf event. Whether you are just playing or vibing, there's something for everyone. Hole sponsorships, put your brand on the map. Sign up to golf, compete, connect, and blaze the trail. General admission, kick back, walk the greens, and enjoy vendors, music, and food and fun. That's it for this week. I'm Amy Carter, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C. this week, Terrence Cole was confirmed as DEA administrator by the Senate Judiciary Committee by a partisan 12-10 vote. His fate now moves onto the floor of the Senate. Also this week, the DEA released a report called the 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment. In that report, the DEA claims that Chinese and Mexican drug cartels are operating inside legal cannabis states from Maine to Oklahoma. Plus, don't be surprised to see more prohibitionist and scare tactics from the DEA under the leadership of Terrence Cole. Here's more from Andrew Barringer.
I'm Andrew Barringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A federal appeals court has dealt a major blow to the cannabis industry's legal strategy, rejecting a high-profile lawsuit that sought to overturn cannabis's federal prohibition on constitutional grounds. The U.S. Circuit Court of the First Circuit affirmed a lower court's dismissal of the case brought by several state-licensed cannabis companies, including multi-state operator Verano Holdings and Massachusetts-based business Canna Provisions. Now, these companies and others argued that Congress had essentially abandoned cannabis prohibition by allowing state legal markets to operate and preventing federal interference through budget riders. They also claimed that this selective enforcement made the federal ban unconstitutional. But Chief Judge David Barron, writing for the three-judge panel, firmly rejected that reasoning, citing that the court ruled that businesses have no fundamental right to cultivate or sell cannabis regardless of the government's hands-off approach in legalized states. The lawsuit was represented by prominent attorney David Boies, whose past clients do include the Justice Department and former Vice President Al Gore. At oral arguments, Boies argued that Congress can only regulate in-state commercial activity if failing to do so would substantially interfere with interstate commerce regulation. However, judges remained unpersuaded, noting that the Controlled Substances Act remains fully intact for regulating commercial cannabis activity for non-medical purposes. The district court had previously found that companies had legal standing to bring to the lawsuit, acknowledging they face real economic injuries from federal prohibition. But both courts ultimately sided with the government's position that the challenge failed to state a valid constitutional claim. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Barringer, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
One more story out of Washington, D.C. Over the past few weeks, lobbyists have been flooding the nation's capital, working to make federal cannabis reform more of a priority for the Republican-controlled government. In the next episode of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast, Executive Director of the NCIA, Aaron Smith, joins PCM TV founder Jimmy Young for an interview with Congressperson Dina Titus from Nevada. She happens to be one of the co-sponsors of the States Act 2.0 that was introduced at the House of Representatives a few weeks ago, and she shared an update on that effort to legalize and regulate that plant nationally.
Are we seeing enthusiastic support as we have with other legislation in the past?
Well, I think you will. I mean, it doesn't go as far as a lot of Democrats would like to see. You know, they'd like to see it totally deregulated, if that's the right term, or descheduled rather. But we're starting to realize that you got to eat this one bite at a time, and this would be a good way to do it. You're right. Republicans like to talk about states' rights, and that's what this does. And we recognize that states are so far ahead of the federal government that if we're not going to catch up, we at least need to get out of the way. And I think that's a message that this bill sends.
A lot of people say, well, it's a Democrat bill, so we're not going to talk about that because we're Republicans. Oh, Republicans, we're not going to talk about to them because they're the other side. How can the two parties come together, and is this plant able to bring it together?
Well, you're so right that things seldom are based on facts, and they often get caught up in politics. And that I'm not going to vote for this bill because it might help my opponent, or it might help the Democrats get a majority, or whatever the reason might be. Or I'm going to trade it for my vote for something else. That's log rolling. So there are all the political problems that go with any kind of legislation. But if it's bipartisan, that's important. If it's not too ideological, that's important. Getting the administration support seems to be important with Republicans during this administration, because as you saw on the budget bill, there were these kind of blowhards and Chip Roy and all these, we're not going to vote for it. We don't like it. It's a bad bill. Get the phone call from the White House. They're right in line. Now, we were optimistic about Donald Trump, who had made some comments in Florida that he was going to be supportive. Now, we've seen that kind of stall, and we have this crazy Secretary of Health and Human Services. I think is on drugs. I don't know where he's coming from. And so it's hard to read what the administration is going to do, and if they're going to make it a priority, and if they're going to weigh in. So that's another element of the politics that we have to keep in mind. But you have to look for ways to attach something to something else that people want, or say, well, I can support your dairy farm bill if you can support my marijuana bill. And just the fact that y'all were there on the Hill, that's very impressive. Having somebody eye to eye talk about it, and for members of Congress to see you're normal people. The old stigma for marijuana and a gateway drug and head shops and glow lights and Che Guevara and all of that, that's just not accurate. When I first started visiting some of the marijuana facilities before it became legal in Nevada and California and Colorado, you see what operations they are. You've got agronomists, you've got chefs, you've got chemists, it's a very professional operation. So your educating members is as important as you're advocating with members. And I think that works.
The full episode of that interview will be released on Wednesday of this week on the WPCM TV network of distribution platforms and wherever you get your podcasts. Next up, we welcome a new member of the Cannabis Coast to Coast News team. It's Louis Joe. He is a licensed delivery operator in the District of Columbia and someone who advocates for the injustices in that market. Here's Louis.
I'm Louis Joe, and this is Coast to Coast Cannabis News. We're bringing you this story straight from the people making it happen. Firsthand, from the movers and shakers and business owners navigating DC's shifting cannabis industry. This week, we take a deep dive into the rapidly changing market, where operators are adjusting to the new medical cannabis system. For years, cannabis in the district existed in a legal gray area under Initiative 71. Initiative 71, or I-71, allowed possession and gifting, but not sales. This meant you could enter a store and purchase a non-cannabis product or service and receive a cannabis product as a gift with your purchase. Now, dispensaries are rushing to transition into the medical cannabis space. And if you think it's just about switching a sign from gifts to sales, well, think again. Business owners have had to overhaul their entire operations, from licensing to compliance to getting their storefronts patient ready. Some pulled it off early and they had record sales. And others barely had a time to set up shop before the deadline on March 31st, and they took a financial hit instead. One dispensary owner summed it up well. They said, 420 wasn't as busy as the I-71 days, but I think we're definitely finding our footing. And that transition is what's fueling the shift. April wasn't just strong because of the holiday. It was the first time many patients truly understood the change and started engaging with the new system. DC saw a record of about 19,000 new patients in the month of April, with dispensaries generating $5.46 million, the highest monthly total since 2013 when the program started. Of course, the road ahead isn't exactly paved in green. Advocates say the medical cannabis market will bring structure, safety, and tax benefits. But the growing pains are real. The big question now, whether businesses can keep up with the patient demand, adapt to tighter regulations, and still thrive. It's a new era in cannabis in DC, and we'll be right here through all the twists and the turns from our nation's capital. I'm Louis Joe with Coast to Coast Cannabis News. All facts, no smoke.
That'll do it for the A Block, our first section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Next, we will check on the international efforts to end cannabis prohibition and an update on the plight of American professional basketball player Jared Shaw, who was arrested for possession of cannabis edibles in Indonesia 3 weeks ago. Indonesia has some of the most strict prohibitionist laws where Shaw could be facing a lifetime and perhaps even death by firing squad. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
We see a lot of companies out there that they don't do budgeting, they don't do forecasting, they don't do any strategic business development or strategic business thinking about what direction they want their company to go. They believe that being in cannabis is just going to automatically be a moneymaker, and they don't plan for things like 3 or 4 years after a state comes online. There's usually a decrease in the profitability of each company because the state gets saturated or gets to the saturation point. If you're not planning for that, you're going to be in trouble when that happens. And that's why we see a lot of cannabis companies go out of business or merge or get sold at that point in time.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.